Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sarah Anello, and I am co-president of Apper Maryland. I'm excited today to welcome Jeff Giannotto from MarketSmart and Sarah Rudich from Montgomery Community College in Pennsylvania. And they are going to talk about how they help their pipeline of different organizations and specifically Sarah's college to give warm leads to frontline fundraisers, which is important to all of us. So I am so excited to welcome them, and they're prepared and ready to go. So without further ado.
Yeah, I guess we'll jump into it here. But yeah, thank you everybody for giving us some of your time. Sarah and I are both really excited to walk through this. Just to start things off, we'll kind of just introduce ourselves a little bit further in our organizations. Do you want to go first, Sarah?
Sure. And not good afternoon, everybody. And not to confuse everybody, but I'm also Sarah. So thank you for letting me be a part of this. I'm happy to be here to share as a client of MarketSmart how they've been able to help us over the past fiscal years. But my name is Sarah Rudich. I'm Senior Director of Advancement here at Montgomery County Community College, and I look forward to sharing out this afternoon.
And as you can see there, my name is Jeff Giannotto. I'm the Director of Sales at MarketSmart. And although I am the Director of Sales and we're going to be using, examples from work we do, I promise this is not just a big sales pitch. You're really going to learn ideas that you can implement in-house or maybe with, even vendors you're partnering with. And perhaps if it is something you want to explore more, how MarketSmart could help you, then we are there to support. But today will be more educational in just showing you kind of the best practices that we see work, whether we were to do them or you were to do them in-house or other. And if you're not familiar with MarketSmart, the sort of, I guess, most salesy side of the presentation, just explaining who we are briefly. We're based out of Maryland originally, but now we're fully remote. But a lot of our staff is from the Maryland area. We focus on mid-level major and planned giving, really a blended approach to support the qualification and cultivation process, as we'll go over in depth today. And there's different pieces to the value proposition, from the strategy we know works to the software we implement, and we even do all the heavy lifting in terms of copy, design, strategy for our customers. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. We'll give you some of the secret of the sauce here today to what works for us and our customers, and welcome you all to ask questions along the way. We'll do our best to stop and pause if we Sarah may flag us down for some questions that we can answer, and we'll definitely have time at the end here today to answer questions too. So yeah, just feel free to lean in. We're really excited to just show you what we know here today. So jumping into things here, we've got a little agenda ahead of us. First, very briefly, we're going to just kind of talk about the difference between a more traditional prospecting and lead allocation process versus what we're referring to as a donor-driven fundraising process. It's not too probably dissimilar from something but it's just a little tweak on how to kind of go about not just delivering a lead that has capacity, but also one that is warm and leaning in. Part of that, there's a lot of ways to get folks lean in, but we're going to key in on a few particular tactics that we know work really effectively. One of which is using surveys as a means to accelerate and really broaden the discovery process for mid-level major and planned gifts. Another is using a virtual gift officer, or really to say automation, to support the follow-up and cultivation of supporters, especially those who aren't immediately portfolio ready but have potential. And then furthermore, how to optimize your portfolios by tracking and utilizing what we call digital body language, which is really to say monitoring and scoring how supporters are interacting with online content related to mid-level major and legacy gifts. Are they watching the video about the major donor? Are they clicking on sample bequest language? These are, qualitative data points that signal readiness for outreach, but they need to be accounted for you to take advantage of that, in a sense. So we'll walk through these different pieces to the puzzle starting at the top there in terms of the sort of traditional versus donor-driven process, what I'll first mention here is some data that comes from a tool that MarketSmart provides that is actually free of charge to the fundraising world called Fundraising Report Card. You'll see that link down there below. And this is these are benchmark data points from that tool, which, just to give a brief description, Fundraising Report Card, if you're not familiar with it, you upload an anonymous file of giving history. Let's say you upload the last 5 years of your organization's giving history, and automatically you're able to access different charts and graphs that help you understand your fundraising trends and metrics. So from numerous organizations over the years submitting their data, we actually have billions of dollars of charitable transactions that we've been able to analyze. And when we look at supporters who give under $100, anybody we've ever analyzed that's given under $100, you can see, although I know it's a little smaller, I'll read it for you. The average gift is about $27. The retention rate is around 18%. The bottom left there is to say that of all the donors we've ever analyzed, almost 76% of them are these under $100 donors, 3 out of 4, but they represent about 6% of the revenue that we analyze. As we move up in giving levels from $1,000 to $5,000 and $5,000 plus, of course, the average donation goes up, but also the retention rates go up. But what's really interesting to kind of, I think, analyze within the mix of all of this, especially in context to how we can qualify supporters for mid-level, major, and legacy gifts and deliver the not just highest capacity, but highest intent and folks who are leaning in the most, is that we're really searching, of course, for needles in the haystack. In this case, it's, if you add up the 2.63 and the 0.77, it's about 3.4% of the donors, and then adding up the 12% or so and 68% or so, about 3.4% of the donors giving almost 4/5 of the donations. Now, that's not all just to say, okay, stop do an annual fund or something like that, but it is to say, in terms of your jobs, it's very hard. And, just knowing someone's capacity is only a part of the story. Ultimately, we need to kind of siphon the list down to, in reality, maybe just 3, 4, 5 people out of a list of 100 who are truly, able and interested in making these types of gifts. But to really then sort of shift over to truly kind of that analysis of the traditional portfolio process versus a donor-driven one. I know this is not, your exact probably process. It's sort of a paraphrased version of it, but a lot of the traditional processes do involve something like this, where there's, some form of an identification process, whether tremendously detailed or maybe just, looking at a single data point. And then caseloads are populated essentially right from there. We found this Joe Johnson who's given X amount and lives here and has this capacity. Let's go after him. But a lot of, frontline fundraisers, and maybe even your own, are often sort of saying, but the lead is cold. I know they've given to us or they've had some connection, but they haven't even leaned in, with the organization. And so what we're really proposing here today is taking on a mindset where, by partnering with marketing and prospect research together, you all kind of together decide, no, we're going to deliver, when we can, it's not always possible, a warm lead to frontline fundraisers. To do that, though, means putting process between identification and caseload population, where there needs to be some preliminary qualification, some automated cultivation, and ultimately, when I say complete qualification, that is to say an actual human being reaching out, to confirm a discovery call or visit that the person is meant for a caseload. So just to help kind of make sense of that, there is still the world of prospect research in this, scenario. But the next step, especially if the lead is cold, isn't to just allocate it right away. It's to first have them go into a marketing-driven process where kind of we're having the donor or supporter lean in if they're willing on their own and self-identify if they have readiness to meet with a gift officer. That might, though, take more time than just one outreach. We might need to drip content onto them over time and really hand off then a warm lead to someone for discovery, for them to kind of subjectively say, okay, based on the fact that they had the right identification data, they leaned in, and my own, conversation and meeting with them, this person should be in my caseload. Now, in essence, that is, elongating this process. But by doing so, it's making it so that when someone really does enter the portfolio, just like I described, they've checked all those boxes. So you're going to have a shorter development cycle, you're going to have a higher win rate, and frankly, you're going to have happier frontline fundraisers and staff because they're spending more of their time with people who are already leaning in and showing interest. Not everybody's going to be willing, in your database to lean in with this process. So it's not a solve all, but it really helps, get those right prospects into portfolios. I know we're getting a bunch of chats here. I can see them popping up. I just was going to see if there's anything we should respond to, but it looks like on the Apper side.
No, there was just one individual had problems seeing the screen, but we think it might be a Zoom update. So, because the rest of us are okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've been having weird Zoom stuff. I updated for this. I don't know, but like every time I tried to share my screen the past few days,
all is good now.
Okay. I've been holding the mic for a second here. I'm about to pass it over to you, Sarah, but I was going to just say, is there anything you were thinking, anything you wanted to add on some of these initial slides here?
No, Jeff, I think you did a really, really great job summarizing that for everybody. Thank you.
Well, with that, we'll get out of the why. Let's say I know the why matters, but I whenever I'm on a webinar, I'm like, come on, just get to the meat and potatoes here. What do we do to fix this problem? So, shifting gears that way, as I mentioned, there's a lot of different offers you could put in front of a supporter to get them to lean in. And at MarketSmart, we've tried tons of them over our 16, 17 years. But surveys have proven time and time again to be the best in terms of the volume of response, but also the quality of response. And so with that, yeah, Sarah, I'll pass over to you to just talk a bit about how this process works and some of the data we're looking for over time and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Jeff. And just like you had said, there's so many different ways that we in the field can pull some data for potential prospects, for potential donors. And, I think from target analytics and wealth ratings and just going through in their portfolios, if there's anything we can maybe pick up a pattern of some kind. But what we're not getting is what's maybe that personal connection? What is that reason why they are giving? And can we explore maybe further why to other areas they may want to support our institutions. So it was important for us. We are a small but mighty team in our department, and it was important for us to really see how we could leverage using MarketSmart to get that survey work out there. What we really enjoyed was being able to customize these surveys. So Jeff, I'm just going to kind of like, as I'm talking, you and I, we're just kind of as we go here, folks. So we wanted to make sure surveys were definitely something that we had tried internally in the past. They just really weren't something that I think we really leaned into until we had joined on with MarketSmart. Fiscal year 23 is when we first joined with MarketSmart to help us understand how we could improve this process. And just the survey work alone really helped open our eyes into how we can engage these donors further. So we had the ability to completely customize these surveys, and our team worked internally to get an idea as what did we want to learn from our pool? What was the information that could help us further engage them? What was something that a question-wise that we could learn a little bit more about their area of giving? And some had been giving in a certain area for many years, and then that stopped. Was that because they had a change of interest? Was that because they had a change personally that they couldn't support that area? So the survey work was something we really leaned into and was important for us to be able to customize. So here what you're seeing are just some of these questions that we felt were important for us to really first engage with our prospect pool and learn a little bit more about them. Kind of coming through the survey results, we were looking at this as we also wanted to be able to have information that we could then act on afterwards. So part of the survey work with some of these questions, are they interested in talking to a member of the team face-to-face? Would they rather just send a gift and not have anybody reach out personally? Are they interested in making that reoccurring contribution? Maybe that's something they didn't know how to do that before. So we wanted to make sure we could gather not just some initial information, but we could also understand better what our next steps might be with some of those that would be filling out the surveys that we have here. We also were interested to see not only were they giving to us, but were they giving to other organizations? Were they interested in learning how they could give even further in impact, or maybe give a legacy type of gift? That might be something that they weren't familiar with, and this might be an opportunity for us to be able to get into their hands some information on estate planning and so on. So we kind of looked at the surveys. We didn't want to send out 50 questions. We all know, as we've done surveys as well, we wanted to make sure that the survey questions were not just small in number, so it wouldn't become daunting, but they also had the questions and quality of questions could allow us to pull a lot of additional information that could then help us not just clean up what we had in our system on them, but then also give us the next steps going forward. I saw a couple questions coming up here, and let's see.
Sarah, do you want me to read them?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, that would be great.
Yeah,
So I'm not using my
sure.
screen.
Yes. So we have a question about what was your survey success rate with former students from 5 years ago or more? So like alumni that haven't recently been there, but also the application seems to be, though, bringing in former parents. So more, let's generalize, people who haven't interacted with you for 5 or more years.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll answer that. We did not survey our students. We also chose at this point to not tailor specifically to alums. So we did pull from our own database certain metrics that we were looking at. So we wanted to see donor engagement. The first time we did the survey, and again, we've done this 3 years, over the 3 fiscal years, we've done a couple different surveys to different tailored groups. So the very first survey that we put out, we were looking to see, we pulled a group that was major gift level. It had about a 500 plus rating in our system, and that these were individuals that had probably in the past 10 years, I think it was something like 10 to 12 years we were looking at. And then from there, we then expanded, we did other surveys. So the student question, we didn't survey the students particular. If they were alums, they were alums that were actually captured as part of the other demographic or the other list that we were pulling together. So I wouldn't have an answer tailored just for the students or the alum. But if I can save the result towards the end as to what we were able to discover as far as some planned gift work, if that's okay, I can give that kind of result a little bit later in my presentation. So it's good. I just wanted to hold off on that one, but that's a great question. So coming back to the surveys here, we wanted to also understand not just maybe where their giving was, but what was a priority for them. So some people have a priority that maybe was top priority was student support. Some had a priority that might have been focused on faculty development. So we wanted to capture in a question here what was their priority, and then what were some other things that were important to them. And this was a way for us to also, with the follow-up work, the cultivation emails that were then drafted, this would allow us to help tailor those cultivation emails to meet with the priority that a survey respondent had. So you can see we were looking at some broader things here: faculty support, program support, special initiatives or capital projects. We wanted to understand if there were donors in our group that, if they hadn't already thought about giving to capital projects or initiatives, was that something that they actually would be interested in? Some may not know that we had that as an area where they could give as well. Thanks, Jeff. I'm hoping I'm running on time. So Jeff, keep me on task here. Okay.
I think we're good. I think we're
okay.
good.
All right, good.
And I was going to say too, I just sort of think about this on the spot with the folks in the crowd. We sometimes like to say to our customers that this survey, can kind of be like this discovery officer, and especially from a prospect researcher standpoint. I mean, how often do you build a list of prioritized prospects, and only a handful can even really go into portfolios because of bandwidth in a sense. Think of this as sort of a way to not just wait on everybody else, and not everyone's going to respond, of course, but in a sense, if you have 100 surplus, prospects from that identification process, you could send them to this survey, and ultimately those that respond, you're going to get, sort of maybe even information that you might not get in a discovery call or visit, just because of how innocuous this is. I was reading today, one of our customers just launched a survey, and they had someone who had a lifetime giving of $35,000. So not that the person was off their radar by any means, but in the end, the person said, yeah, I'd be somewhat likely to give through a donor advised fund and somewhat likely to give through a foundation. They had not given through those, mechanisms up to that point. And they said, you're already in my will. And they had no knowledge of that legacy gift. And ultimately, there's an 80-20 in everything in life, including legacy gifts. For instance, in that probably for most organizations, 80% or more of the realized plan gifts that they, accrue come from 20% or less of their supporters. So that $35,000 lifetime donor could be a pretty substantial, legacy gift. And on top of that, he revealed his age and other, demographics and things. So I saw, and I know that Sarah, you had, I think, noted that we can come back to,
Yep.
or I'm sorry, I was thinking Sarah Anella, she had noted we'll come back to sort of a question that popped up of, is MarketSmart like a wealth screener or something like that? And the short answer is no, but we can go more in depth in that. We really are a marketing firm, I guess is the most basic way you could say it. But we happen to have a proprietary scoring algorithm that you're sort of seeing a little bit of the secret to the sauce here on how we score and prioritize self-reported information, what we call, going back a few slides here, we score and analyze verbatims and digital body language. What are people saying to us? That we, through forms, through surveys that tell us about their readiness for mid-level, major, and legacy gifts, and what are they doing, as well as we'll get into. So jumping ahead here, I think,
No, you're good.
yeah.
Yeah. And actually, you jogged my memory too, because one of the examples I wanted to give, and Jeff, if you don't mind going back to that first, second, third priority slide, that will be helpful. So with our, an example of how this was really beneficial for us, we had an individual that was in our database. They were an alum, or they are an alum, but their overall giving level did not register in any of our portfolios for major gift level. So our major gift level starts at 10,000 and above. This was an individual that had not popped up in the major gift area. They were part of the survey based on the length of years they were giving, the fact that they had a connection to the college, they were an alum. And when we sent the survey out, this individual was in that survey. When the individual did the survey, when the results came back, we were amazed to see how engaged and how high the score was that this individual had put forward. So when we looked into their survey answers, we found somebody that was highly engaged, highly interested in being engaged with the college. They had been committing to the college at a low-level gift almost monthly for 20 plus years. So it wouldn't have caught our radar. But the survey allowed us to get some more background information, and we did a reach out as a thank you for them to conduct the survey. And it was that warm lead that we needed to then open up the conversation with this individual who had expressed to us that they were not at a point where they could make an impactful gift yet. They really wanted to, and they requested all the plan giving material that we had available, which opened up another conversation to have with them about future planning. It was something that we would not have discovered through the traditional methods of research and analysis. But because they had conducted the survey and we reviewed their survey results and the reach out that we did, that warm reach out led to this individual then not only did the plan giving material receive that, they've also registered and attended for classes after that. And every time I give this individual a phone call to check in on how they're doing, they pick up and answer right away, ask how everything's going. They're looking forward to seeing the newsletter from the president's office next month to see what's going on. So it's been an engagement level that was not there previously, and it would not have been captured or fueled if it was done through traditional methods of discovery. So that's just one example of others that we have had over the years through the survey work.
Hey, Sarah, we had a quick clarification question. So when you sent out the survey, the responses were not anonymous. You knew who was answering, right? Because you could
Correct.
match it up with our other information.
Correct.
Thank,
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. And there is throughout the whole survey, they can still move through the survey without having to complete all the questions. That was something that was also very important to us. We didn't want somebody to feel like they were locked in to have to give us all the information. So it was a way for us to maybe capture some updated demographic information. It was a way for us to get a little bit more insight into maybe their email address, because there is an opportunity for them to update their contact information, whether email or phone number. But they had the opportunity to still complete other parts of the survey and not have to answer everything.
But yeah, it's a good question there, in terms of there are, a lot of, whether alumni survey at a higher ed, institution or more sort of donor relations, survey at any other organization. I do find a lot of them tend to be, anonymous, which can increase response rates, which is particularly important if you're looking for sort of trends and things that can help, maybe support how you're going to segment marketing. But in this scenario, if the goal is to, identify hot opportunities, we got to know who they are, right? And so, in essence, although that might lower our response rate a little bit, it means that we're going to be able to, of course, follow up directly, just like, Sarah described. So, we definitely recommend for this type of survey, for this purpose, that you have that ability, yeah, to track and score. And I'm glad you also told that story because it said my internet was unstable for a second there. So you helped helped carry the load while I was like waiting for my screen to come back. So hopefully that didn't glitch. So ultimately, obviously, we're using a lot of examples from MarketSmart because that's what we've got access to. But at the end of the day, whether you already have a survey, the alumni survey or even a general one, you could update it, potentially with some of the questions we're talking about. And ultimately, however you do a survey, we definitely recommend if you can, even if it was as simple as you're reading the answers and plugging it into an Excel sheet you made or something like that. But it is important to score the survey response because it's a matrix of data that some data can outweigh the others. Maybe you have somebody who says maybe or no to every single given question, but they're 80 to 89, they have no children, they're not married and they own a business but are retired now. Well, maybe you still want to talk to them, quickly. And so, oh, and although they said no to all the giving questions, they said you're my top choice for giving or something like that. So it's important to be able to analyze sort of the self-identification questions about their giving, readiness, and the demographics are tremendously important. And then furthermore, just as Sarah was mentioning, that's maybe who you talk to, but what you talk about is when you reach out is really their story and how you can kind of connect that, to their engagement and perhaps even giving when they're ready. So jumping ahead here, I was already kind of speaking to some of these easy ideas of sorts, but maybe you do already have a survey and you could just tweak questions or even how you're scoring it from what you just saw. Or maybe you don't have a survey and you're not, ready to work with a vendor or something like that. Even if all you were to do is make, a Google survey or even a print survey just on your letterhead, even going to the next board meeting and handing it out, in person saying, hey, we'd love to hear what you have to say. I promise you, you're going to get responses back and you're going to find out things that you didn't know about these supporters. So don't think of this as some huge, thing you have to do. In fact, really, Sarah's approach, to kind of doing this in waves is on purpose to make it, manageable and segmented. And also just to, this is going to be potentially new for your organization in terms of just allocating and working with leads like this. So it's good to start small. Now, when you're ready to scale it out, it is something that you can kind of make ubiquitous. You could have a link to that survey in the third email in the PS after someone makes an online donation. You could put on your website, etc. So there's a lot of ways to spread things out. And I'm just being cognizant of our time as well, Sarah. So we're about halfway mark here at 2:30 or so. So I think we're doing good pace wise. But where we're going to go next, in essence, what we've discussed so far, partly all leads down the path of how do we find hot leads that we can allocate right now? And that's, of course, objective number one. But the reality is that there's going to be kind of like a 90-10 or even 80-20 effect within the survey response. For every 10 responses you get, there's one or two that are worthy of allocating because they're saying, I'm ready. But what do you do with the person who did say, no to all the giving questions, or said, don't, reach out to me just yet, but I am interested in X, Y, and Z? There's going to be people who are worthy of outreach, in essence, just not sort of worthy of just yet of allocating to a portfolio. And that's a challenging spot, especially for a prospect researcher, when you sort of send the opportunity out and then it comes back, and it's not that it's bad, it just needs more time. And so ultimately, automation can be a solution in that sort of scenario. Ultimately, though, automation is used in a number of ways. You can just sort of blanket it to someone if you really wanted to. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. But we tend to recommend our customers approach it like you're seeing here, where whether we're asking it in a survey or we're asking it when someone downloads a brochure or we're asking it anywhere in marketing, we really want to invite the supporter to self-identify that they truly want to hear more from you. And of course, not everyone's going to say yes to this, but the ones that do, you know something there. I chose to survey them. They chose to answer. They chose to voluntarily say, yes, I want to hear more from you. And yet they weren't ready to self-identify. They didn't say they're ready to give yet. Let's not give up on this one. Let's also not encumber the frontline fundraiser. And the interesting thing too, I think, is that when organizations think about that type of automation, sometimes their head can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to do this, crazy complicated thing. And actually, the best thing you could do is to be as simple as possible, because ultimately that person who's saying, I want to hear from you, but I'm not ready to self-identify, they're truly saying, like, I don't know just yet how or why I want to give. And so trying to put them into this crazy nexus where you're trying to know what they're thinking or what they're going to do is too hard. Just give them the menu, let them kind of see a variety of stories and ways to give, and their engagement will signify the areas they're most interested in. So with that, we'll pull up some examples of the types of touches, really non-solicitous touches, that we recommend and that are working for Sarah and the team over there. So yeah, I'll pass it over to you, Sarah.
All right, tag I'm it now. So yes, exactly. So the surveys themselves, and that's important through this whole process, we were not surveying to solicit, and our follow-up, as we're calling cultivation emails, were also not solicitations. But what we were trying to do was we were trying to, for those that did the survey and opted in to have occasional emails sent to them, we wanted to make sure that those emails were sharing out the successful stories of support that the students were receiving. So here's an example of us thanking those for doing the survey, and then looking forward to sharing out more stories as we go. So Jeff, if you're able to switch one more, there we go. Here's another example, and you can see this is something where there's a story link in this email here. Yep, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Our marketing department captures student stories all the time because they are already working on putting material out there for public view, whether it's in the newspapers or on social media, Instagram, and so on and so forth. So our marketing department's always capturing student stories, and we are able to work with them to gather some of those stories. And based on the survey results that we were getting back, we could send these stories out to those that maybe had said they were interested in learning more about the music technology program. And so we could customize, not having to reinvent the wheel, pulling from something the college was already doing, but then send out these tailored stories with these thank yous so that the individuals that did the survey could learn a little bit more and maybe pique their interest. And that would be another way for us to be able to follow up with them in that warm lead environment of just making sure you saw the story about Colin. Isn't it wonderful? Is there anything else I can share with you? Would you like to come and see the studio itself? We can help connect you with the director of the program and learn a little bit more. So it was a great way for us to further engage them into what's happening here at the college and what the students are experiencing. And it was not focused on solicitation at all, because that wasn't our goal. Our goal was to further engage. And then when the individual was ready to have that conversation, we were right there ready to have that conversation if they wanted to say, how can I help support that program? Or how can I maybe make a legacy gift to support students in that program? So that's where these cultivation emails have been really helpful in helping us further engage those individuals. And what we did was we did kind of a test. Those that had done the initial survey back in fiscal year 23, we ran an additional check with them in fiscal year 25, and we found that their survey results had grown. So their engagement had grown. And I mentioned, I teased a little bit earlier, we discovered what we didn't know before surveys going out. We discovered 10 new planned gifts through the survey and the follow-up cultivation emails that were going out. So we had 10 unknown planned gifts that were, information was shared with us through that survey taker in the survey. So another example right here, taking them to the website itself, where microsite where they can get information about the student stories, the programs, and also they can get information on how to give in other ways, whether it's through donor advised funds or it's IRA, or even through the plan giving process. So I'm sorry, Jeff, I put you on the spot there.
No, totally fine. Totally fine. And, you may be, I don't know, maybe you're not, maybe you are thinking to yourself, but that's not quite my area. If I'm on the prospect research side of sort of doing this type of automation and such, but actually in a way, if interpreted a certain way, not that it's your sole responsibility, of course, but it is actually in your world, in that ultimately, at first through the survey, we're talking about verbatims. Now we're beginning to talk about digital body language, which, if tracked, is absolutely a piece of the story. Say someone answers your survey, just like Sarah analyzed, a year ago, and it was a lukewarm response, not bad, but it wasn't, necessarily the top response that was getting into a portfolio. And so you have them just kind of flow through automation for a period of time where you're non-solicitously providing donor stories, impact, maybe some tax tips. And 12 months later, you suddenly see that they clicked through on the story of Colin and they spent 3 minutes on your website watching the video. And no one's been able to get them on the phone. Nobody's been able to get a visit. Nobody's even called them, since then. That really is no different, actually, than if someone had reached out to them and called them and gotten them engaged, frankly. Not that this automation replaces a frontline fundraiser. There's nothing better than one-to-one engagement. There's nothing that will build a relationship stronger than that. But if the person's not ready for that type of engagement, and or you don't have the bandwidth to reach them with that type of one-on-one connection, then this is a fantastic plan B to implement and track and score, so that you can both get hot leads that pop up every time you're doing these feedback loops, but then have leads kind of bubble up over time as they lean in with content. And so a part of that, I already sort of described the story this way, sort of the automation and the web pages go hand in hand, because it really, I'm sure you see it in your own engagement as is. It's not as though most organizations see massive traffic to their pages related to major and planned gifts, but that's mainly because they're hidden behind so many layers, and because donors aren't really thinking of it that way. Most of the time when they visit your website, they really do just want to, see a video or engage with some lighter content. They're not thinking, I'm going to, click on their foundation, then their ways to give, then plan giving, and I'm going to read the story. No, it's too many layers. And so you do need to bring the horse to water, and automation is the mechanism to do that. But then ultimately, kind of passing over to you, Sarah, you also to have the right content on there to actually get them to lean in and track and score that information. So yeah, pass the mic back over.
Yeah, sounds good. And that's where you can, with your follow-up cultivation emails that share those student stories, you can have links in there that connect them back to web pages that you already have in place. So it's not a heavy lift in any case or any way. And so these links were able to direct people back if they wanted to click more into the college site and learn more. Those links were right there. So just like Jeff said, they didn't have to go through themselves multiple pages to get to the information that they wanted. It was also through the surveys as well. There was a question in the surveys that we wanted to make sure somebody may not be familiar with other ways of giving. Maybe it's just an online ACH or a check that they mailed. That's the only thing that they're familiar with. And so one of the questions we wanted to put out there was, would they be interested in learning other ways of giving? And that's a great question that we found, was because people, in clicking that, then they could go through and click other things, other pamphlets or materials that we already had developed in-house that they would want to have sent to them. And so it was a way for them to get the information directly. And then we could follow up and just with that personal call, say, just making sure that you received it. If you have any questions, we're here to help answer them. And it was another touch point for us. So sometimes putting that question in there in any of the surveys you do about, are you interested in learning about other ways that you could give? It's a way for them to see that question right there in front, make that choice yes, and then you can do that follow-up rather than having to wait for them to proactively try to figure it out on their own. I saw there was a question that popped up. I didn't
Yeah,
know.
I could.
Yeah, this is a good one.
Okay.
So how are you tracking impact that this work is having on your fundraising versus the status quo before? Are you seeing an increase or is it flat in what you're tracking? So I don't know, maybe something like qualification work, or I know you mentioned the gifts that have emerged. So things along those lines.
Yeah, no, all really great questions. So we're tracking engagement in the individual records, and this is something that we would love to see implementation in the future between the CRM program that we use and MarketSmart to be able to easily integrate. And hopefully we're getting there with the way technology is. But what we do is we do it in two ways. So we're tracking it within MarketSmart. There's a dashboard that we're able to go through and track all of that digital language. And then in our CRM, we're able to put in that information, those actions and those responses. As far as overall impact, it's not, we've seen a major increase in the plan giving legacy, and we've seen a major increase in engagement with emails, follow-up discovery calls, and so on. It hasn't moved the needle, I would say, in the overall fundraising numbers, meaning we haven't seen a $1 million drop come through from that. But that, again, wasn't the whole reason for us doing the surveys here. This was a way for us as a small advancement department to be able to help dig into that pipeline in a more efficient and more efficient time management way. And so it's allowed us to be able to do faster qualification work. And so I'd say as far as the impact, we're seeing a great impact in our activity work in the short period of time. So the planned gifts themselves is wonderful for us, discovering those 10 in individuals that were not on our radar. They, about 3/4 of them were not active donors. And so I think that's an important thing that there wouldn't have been any way for us to know through our CRM and all of our report running if they had left that gift prior to us, their passing and then us being notified. So it's work that for us, it's engagement. It's been very successful for us in increasing our engagement levels with a very small staff. But again, the whole goal wasn't to dramatically increase the fundraising, but just to help us move that needle a little bit better. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and maybe, I don't know, I can add some additional color in terms of just in general, how we see it work for folks and it aligns, with what you're saying. But I think you talk and help me frame my thoughts here. But, so there's the opportunity, right? There's the ROI that we can calculate here now. But the other side of the coin that I think you're speaking to well, Sarah, is sort of the opportunity cost, in essence of, had we not, done anything like this, would any of these supporters that leaned in have gotten, a call or a visit or a touch from us? They certainly would have gotten an ask, but if they haven't been giving or weren't giving, would they have leaned in? And so ultimately, it's sort of following that adage of ask for money, you'll get advice, ask for advice, and you'll get money. Well, how many people in your database actually do get asked for their advice and their opinion and their story? In reality, for most organizations, it's a really small universe of people, usually just those who have a relationship with a fundraiser and, a good fundraiser who treats them, in that way, in a sense. Outside of that, it's mainly asks and it's mainly sort of announcements, from the organization, maybe some events and things like that. But it's pretty rare, and sometimes we find someone who's been giving or engaging with you for, just like you said, Sarah, years and years and years, but no one's ever asked them, anything like this. And so ultimately, The immediate value that our clients see is typically the growth in their plan giving file. And then a big opportunity is more of sort of a moving of the middle, especially in terms of gifts of assets. Somebody who's been giving a few $100s or none at all, or lapsed a while ago, but they say, I'm likely to give through a donor advised fund or a foundation or an IRA. I mean, as you all know from the prospect research side, you can't purchase that data. You can't screen that data. It's not publicly accessible, who has an IRA or a DAF or et cetera. You might even find someone who says, I'm already giving through my IRA, but it's been coming in anonymously. So you haven't been able to steward that supporter correctly. Maybe you're stewarding them like a $5 donor because that's what their cash gift says, but they're really a $25,000 donor based on their anonymous IRA gift. So it's really important to see the value of this from multiple facets that really kind of, I think, more than anything, stem back to sort of how you would view the value of having a discovery officer that was reaching out to unassigned supporters and getting them to lean in and tell you a bit about their story and their why and their readiness. And the reality is, even some of the biggest organizations we partner with, but certainly the smaller to mid-sized ones, just don't have an intention to build a budget for that type of discovery officer, or even if they do, they're barely scratching the surface. There's still, tens of thousands of people, who are going untouched. And so this is a really valuable way for an organization to broaden its discovery process and get people who are passionate to lean in rather than say waiting for some other charity that they're passionate to do that themselves and get them to lean in. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of add a few sides to that as you think about the value of not just investing in MarketSmart. That's not really the point, but just in general of investing in a marketing plan that allows you to generate warm leads from the unassigned.
Mhm. And I think it's that having them feel that they are a part of the story that you want to tell. So you're sharing the student stories, you're sharing the donor stories, and the individual filling out that survey may also be a donor or they may not be a donor yet. But you're asking them to give a little bit of an insight into what motivates them to give. And even some of the questions we had were questions that allowed them to even say, the college isn't at the top of my list, but it's near the top. And that was important for us as well to understand. That became a piece for us to then see, well, through the cultivation emails, can we move that to the top of the list? And we did see that for those that had done the survey in the initial run in fiscal year 23. And then we did a check-in in fiscal year 24 and then 25. We saw that progress and that movement upward. So, yeah. Just an example here. You're talking about the digital body language, Jeff, and this is what's really helpful for us. This is what when we see, and we set internally a lead score that we start kind of going through and saying, okay, let's take a really good look at maybe the lead score we're looking at is those that had scored 500 and above in their lead score area. And going through that in our regular prospect meetings, we then go through and see what was that body language like, what was that digital body language like as they were going through these cultivation emails. And then we pull that information and we put that into our CRM to be able to help track the work that we're doing. So this is just an example as well. Some of the data that we were getting individuals, and this is just, example, individuals in here, it tells us when they were doing the survey, what that lead score is. And Jeff already showed you that chart with the kind of, I call it the fill in the dots, or the Scantron test. If you remember the old Scantrons where you had to fill in the pencil. So we get the lead score from that. That's a combination of their engagement through the survey and what we were able to gather from their demographic. And then the ability, if they're interested, do they fit that legacy gift area? If they're interested, if they will consider or not consider, if they have left a gift or not. There are some, as you can see, that didn't complete that area. They didn't feel comfortable to fill that in. Again, we wanted to make sure people felt comfortable to answer any questions that they felt comfortable answering, but didn't restrict them from going through the full survey. And then if they were a major gift level, again, based on multiple demographic pieces. This is a lot of information here that in a survey that you are doing on your own, if you're doing something internally or tweaking something you already have, it doesn't have to be as elaborate as this, but it was something that was able to help us kind of narrow down for our team. So.
Yeah, I think it's really more than anything, the sort of these tips kind of jump into it of look, there is the ability to go as robust as you've seen today, but even if you just did one or any of these things we're about to mention, it will be of value to you. Perhaps you already have, some simple or complex automation that you could adapt, especially in terms of perhaps a lot of times automation could be, or not, I won't say a lot, but it could be more transactional than actually you want, in a way, asking too much, sort of pushing people to make a decision or to give or to go to some, call to action that takes them to giving. You're going to get actually a lot. It's sort of a less is more thing. If you just provide value and build trust, especially through storytelling, you'll get a lot more than if you ask for money in this type of scenario. Maybe you don't have automation in place at all, but you're sitting there saying, but I do have what you're saying, Jeff, this list of people who I've identified and we gave them to the fundraiser gave it back to us. Maybe you could work with your marketing team to just say, could we just put in place 1, 2, 3, automate emails just to carry us from now till the end of year push, where we can make sure this group stays warm, even though they're not in a portfolio right now. As just like the survey can be shared everywhere, that opt-in can be shared everywhere of saying, hey, do you want to hear more from us? Do you want an even deeper connection to the foundation? And it allows you to go to leadership and really present a bigger picture. Yes, there's all the wins that you can report of gifts that were closed from people who were allocated, whether from this process or not. But imagine being able to go to leadership and saying, not only did we close all these gifts from the people that were allocated, but we also have this group of 400 people, I'm just making it up, that showed interest but weren't immediately portfolio ready. And we have them flowing through automated touches. And we can see they're getting a 40, 50% open rate, a 10% click. They're engaged, they're warm. We've got the next pipeline moving towards us. It's going to instill a lot more confidence in leadership and for yourself. Maybe all you want to do out of today is you say, I've never really looked at our tracking that closely, who's clicked on this or that. Just go in today, look at it, see, and not everybody is going to be, some people, their actions will be anonymous and such, depending on how you've programmed your CRM, but there's got to be some people that you can see actually that they've been leaning in, with sample request language, or they've been clicking on a link about your capital campaign, and yet no one's ever called them, no one's ever allocated them. Use that as a means of picking out a prospect. And as mentioned, kind of in many ways, just like that last example, it doesn't have to be a big thing, what we're describing here today, but just taking a few, tips that we drew from. So we are tracking pretty good in time. We got 7 more minutes here. That was our final slide. I'll pull this up just, to have our, face and name there, but we'd be happy to just answer any questions that are out there. I don't know if Sarah, Anella, is there a particular question that, you were going to prompt there?
Yeah, so there were some more clarification questions about survey. So a little bit about, did you have a strategy for handling people who clicked on the survey link initially but didn't fill it out? Like, so did you have a reach out again cadence? And then just a simple question about were the links, I think, maybe for engagement in the thank you email?
Yes. So, and to answer the 2 questions. So the first one, there was on all the surveys that did go out over the past 3 fiscal years, there were what we call non-responders. So people who had received the email, but they hadn't clicked in, or maybe they clicked on the email, but kind of stopped. They didn't complete the survey. And we were able to track that through the digital body language. We had what we called a non-responders survey follow-up. So it was a kind of a nudge, kind of, hey, if you have a moment, can you take the survey? We'd appreciate your feedback. And that went out about 2 to 3 weeks after the initial first survey would go out. So that non-responders one would go out. And then if they didn't respond to that second one, we stopped. This was not, and this was not kind of push and push and push. But when we did the next full round, so the next year, we would incorporate those non-responders back in there. So they were always in that system, but we didn't push if they didn't do the first time and the second non-responder follow-up. If they didn't do that, then it was about a year, and then they were put into that cycle again. With the thank yous, the thank you emails that went out for, oh, look at that. Thank you, Jeff. You're going right through there. So the thank you emails that went out. So we had a link in there for if anybody wanted to reach out and connect with us to talk a little bit more. But the thank you really just came out as like, thank you so much for giving us your feedback. And then they were entered into that cultivation round of emails based on their survey results. That cultivation email system started, and that usually went out about 30 days, maybe 4 to 6 weeks after they had, yes, I would like to receive occasional emails with updates. So they had to opt in for it. And then we gave them about a 4 to 6 week window of break time. And then those student impact or donor impact stories went out like you see here, this one. And so that's how those story links went. But the initial thank you for doing the survey was really just focused on thank you so much for giving us your feedback. And then if they wanted to connect with us, so maybe they did the survey and they were like, yeah, you know what, I really want to talk to somebody, they could click and connect in with us that way.
Yeah. So all afterwards, but just then, therefore, not like I think the question said, when they take them out of the survey, you're totally right. We want to keep them focused and filling out the survey, but then after that, dripping value on them. Yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and then we can wrap up with your contact information. This is about your college, Sarah. So your alumni relations staff, are they part of development work? Were they involved in this engagement strategy with prospects, or just the direct fundraising stuff?
So the Alumni Association, and if anybody's familiar with community colleges, that's always that nut everybody wants to crack, because if you are a community college and your alums are just really hard to get into sometimes, they like to identify maybe as if they go to a 4-year, as an alum from that 4-year institution. So our Alumni Association sits with our career services department. So it's a way for us to engage our alumni throughout the college and assist the next group of students coming through. We do work very closely with the career services department and the Alumni Association. They were not part of this survey, as we were really focused on it being out of our advancement office and our fundraising staff. But we did incorporate within our stories, impact stories, we did incorporate alumni in those stories. So we worked collectively in those engagement, follow-up, cultivation material pieces, but the actual survey work itself was focused primarily for the advancement staff and the frontline fundraisers, as opposed to the Alumni Association. Yeah, but good question. And if anybody figures out how to, fix that community college alumni connection piece, let me know.
I'm from a community college myself.
I'm a graduate of Montgomery County Community College myself, and I work here for the college. I've been for 6 years. However, I also graduated from Temple University. And so for many years, I just identified only as Temple University grad, but I'm a graduate of both. So, yeah.
All right, so that does bring us to the end. I want to make sure that we can wrap up, and thank you, Jeff, for putting the contact information on the screen. Thank you both for your insights, Jeff, for contextualizing everything in terms of what MarketSmart sees, like industry-wide, and then Sarah, thank you for the invaluable personal experience with this subject. Jeff, we wanted to mention that Sherry will be at our attending APRA Maryland co-hosts a Mid-Atlantic APRA chapters happy hour at APRA Prospect Development, the Big PD conference. And this year it's in Baltimore, so we expect to see a lot of people there. Registration will be opening soon, but Sherry's going to be there. So if you're interested in MarketSmart specifically, you'll be able. Oh, thank you, Sherry.
There we
coming
go.
on screen.
The name, but yeah.
Look for Sherry's face. And after this, we'll send out the recording to all registrants. Jeff, we had a request for the slides. I imagine you can get me those. So just give us a few days and we'll try to do a nice post webinar email for everyone. Thank you so much for attending today. Thank you again to Jeff and Sarah. Thank you all for attending. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you to both.